Shalom, friends. Welcome to this shiur, this lesson in Talmud, Gemara. We're studying Masechet Berachot, Tractate Blessings. And my name is Eliyahu Shir. I'm coming to you from Chesed Ve'emet, my website, www.lovingkindness.co. Don't forget, if you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please do click on the subscribe button right away and the bell button to be notified of future shiurim. So here we are, we're making use of the beautiful Talmud Bavli, the Koren Talmud Bavli edition, where you can see the text, the original Hebrew Aramaic text, the English translation and notes, together with diagrams and illustrations, photographs, and so on and so forth, just to make our learning experience all that more meaningful and easy to understand. What I do is I read the text in the original and I translate it. And where necessary, I refer to the notes and the various other parts of the text. If there's anything I've left out, please do follow along in any case and fill in the gaps that I might have not clarified well enough. So we're at the moment on Daf Chaf Aleph Amud base, that's page 21, side B, side 2. And we've just finished discussing the issue of if a person is in doubt whether he had already recited the Keriat Shema or not. Should he repeat the Keriat Shema? What is the exact halacha? And the same thing applies to with Shemoneh Esrei. If he's in doubt whether he davened, or he remembers all of a sudden that he davened and he finds himself in a situation, maybe he should now repeat it, maybe he shouldn't say it, what should he do? That's what we discussed in our last lesson. And then I went a little bit ahead and I didn't realize that the discussion about Kedushah was just about to come up on the same page, and I thought it was only the next page. And of course, I'd already read the notes over here, but we're going to read it inside again. For those of you who have listened to the previous shiur and wondered where that fits in, please listen in now, and you'll see how it all fits in at this point in time. So a new section begins. Omar Rav Huna said, Hanichnas lebeis hakneset. Somebody goes into a shul. Umatza tzibor shemispalelim. And he finds the community davening. Here is the law. He walks into the shul, he sees everybody praying, he realizes he's late. If he is able to begin and to complete his Shemoneh Esrei, until it will be that the cantor, the representative of the community who's davening for the community, the Shaliach Tzibur, if he will not yet get to Modin, then all is well. Yitpalel, he should daven. Comes into shul, he's late. He sees they're already davening. He makes a calculation in his mind that if he begins davening and he ends in time that the Shaliach Tzibur has not yet reached Modin, he may daven. V'im lav, if not, al yispalel, he should not daven. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, if he does a mathematical calculation in his mind and he thinks to himself that he would be able to begin and to complete until it will be that the Shaliach Tzibur, the representative for the community who's davening for everybody, that he won't yet get to Kedushah, which of course precedes the Modin by quite some paragraphs, Yitpalel, he may daven, which means to say he's got to be fast enough so that he'll be able to finish his prayer before the Shaliach Tzibur gets to the Kedushah. The imlav, if not, if he does a calculation and he realizes he's not going to make it in time to be able to say, in other words, the Kedushah together with the Tzibur, with the community, al yitpalel, he shouldn't daven. Why should it be that way? In order, of course, that he'll be able to recite the Kedushah together with the community. Let us take a look here again at the halacha and the notes. One who enters a synagogue and found the congregation reciting the Amidah prayer, one who enters a synagogue and finds the congregation reciting the Amidah prayer, if he is able to conclude his prayer before the prayer leader recites Kedushah or Kaddish, he may begin to pray. If not, he should wait until after the prayer leader recites Kedushah or Kaddish before beginning his prayer, as long as by doing so, the deadline for reciting that prayer does not pass. The halacha was ruled in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, who was greater than Rav Huna. In addition, the statements of Rav Ada bar Ahava in the Talmudic discussion support his opinion. However, if he entered the synagogue after Kedushah, If he is able to conclude his prayer before the prayer leader begins the blessing of thanksgiving, the Modin that we spoke about before, he may begin to pray. As with regard to that case, there is no dispute between Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rav Huna. So is the halacha. Notes, Kedushah, generally, the term Kedushah refers to the sanctification recited in the prayer leader's repetition of the Amidah prayer. However, there are additional passages that fall under that rubric, e.g., the sanctification recited in the first blessing accompanying Shema in the morning, as well as the sanctification included in the prayer, a Redeemer will come to Zion, Uva Letzion, recited at the conclusion of the service. The Gaonim debated whether an individual is permitted to recite those passages. Furthermore, there were those who asserted that the Kedushah in the Amidah prayer, since it is merely a series of verses, is not considered a sacred matter and may be recited by an individual. It's a fascinating discussion. Those who wish to can pursue the issue a little bit further in the halachic works, in the Shulchan Aruch, Harav, in the Mishnah Brura. Take a look and see what are the conclusions and what is the practical halakha in terms of, therefore, the individual reciting these different parts of the Kedushah by himself. But it comes out in any way, bottom line is that when davening with the community, it's very important when one is doing the repetition of the Shemoneh Esrei, that is, one is with the community at the time that they do the Kedushah, and that one, of course, cannot just do the Kedushah by himself in general, because that is part of the repetition of the Amidah prayer. The Gemara continues, B'mai ka mipalgi, in what is it that they're arguing? Meaning to say, two opinions were given in our discussion. One opinion said that if he could make it in time until the Shaliach Tzibur did not get to Modin, he should then, of course, begin. If he can make it in time, he can begin and end, and all is well up until Modin, when the Shaliach Tzibur reaches Modin. And then he will answer Modin together with the community, with the Shaliach Tzibur. The other opinion says no. He must be able to daven fast enough that he'll be in time for the Kedushah. This is obviously what they're arguing about. Mar Savar, one master held, Yachid Omer Kedushah, that the individual may recite Kedushah. How is that? Because he'll do the Kedushah all by himself, and he'll still get to the prayer leader by the time he gets to Modim. Umar Savar, and one of the masters held, Ein Yachid Omer Kedushah, the individual may not recite the Kedushah. Implication is, well, if he can't recite the Kedushah, he must make certain to be able to recite the Kedushah together with the community. He needs to finish his Shemoneh Esrei at a much faster speed. The Gemara continues. V'chein Omar Rav Adar ba'Ahava, and so said Rav Adar, the son of Ahava. Minayin, where do we know it from? She'ein hayachid Omer Kedushah, who taught you such a thing, that the individual may not recite the Kedushah prayer? Shneimar, I'll tell you, says the Gemara. Here is an answer to your question. Where do you know it from that an individual may not recite Kedushah? Because it says, V'nikdashti b'toch b'nei Yisrael, and I shall be sanctified amongst the children of Israel. Well, how do you understand that that refers to the Kedushah in terms of the community? Well, first of all, we see the word nikdashti, Kedushah, and also it says b'toch b'nei Yisrael. It must be amongst the Jewish people. Kol davar shebekedusha lo yahe pachot me'asara. Anything that relates to a nature of Kedushah will not have an effect with less than 10 people, meaning you may not engage in matters of Kedushah unless there are 10 people. Interesting idea. So far it says, V'nikdashti b'toch b'nei Yisrael, and I shall become sanctified amidst the B'nai Yisrael, the children of Israel. And according to this, the B'nai Yisrael refers to this community. Lo pachot me'asara, not less than 10. Asks the Gemara, my mashma. How do you know that? From where do you know it from, that the community refers to 10? How would we know such a thing? It doesn't make sense to me. Where does it say over here 10? The Tanei, Rabnai, Achud Rabbi Chia, and Rabnai, the brother of Rabbi Chia, the son of Abba, he taught the following. Asya, it comes, toch, amidst. Now, this is the way of the Gemara's language of teaching us, that the Gemara is about to teach us a concept known as a Gezerah Shava. The Gezerah Shava is when we're able to analyze a situation that applies in one particular place, and we see that that particular concept also exists in another place, we may take the rules of the one concept and apply it to the other concept, which means to say, we see that the word toch appears somewhere, and then toch appears somewhere else. If toch appears somewhere in relation to X, then we can assume that toch also applies equally in terms of Y. Ksiv hacha, it is written here, V'nikdashti betoch b'nei Yisrael, and I shall become sanctified amongst the children of Israel. This is the verse that we're reciting now. It says over here in Leviticus 22:32. That's the verse we just read. Ukasiv Hassam, and it's written over there, where in the book of Numbers, chapter 16, verse 21, it says, Hibadlu mitoch ha'ida hazot, separate yourself from amongst this community. Again, let's take a look at this. Here is referring to B'toch B'nei Yisrael as a community, and here it's referring to the idea of separating from the community. Ma lahalan asara, just as it is over there, where Hashem is telling, where Hashem, who is telling who, written in the portion of Korach, here where Moshe is saying, separate from amongst the community, separate from amongst this bad community of Korach, ma lahalan asara, just as it is that over there it refers to 10, afkan asara. So to over here it refers to 10, which means to say that another Gezerah Shava comes out, that later on when we see that the spies go and check out the land of Israel, so in the land of Canaan, to see, they go to spy out the land before they enter it, there also we speak about the idea of a community of people, and since there were 10 spies that went through, we see that a community there is also 10. The connotation of 10 associated with the words among written in the portion of Korach is in turn derived by means of another verbal analogy between the word congregation written there and the word congregation written in reference to the 10 spies who slandered Eretz Israel. How long shall I bear with this evil congregation? Consequently, among the congregation, there must be at least 10. So the idea of this portion in the Gemara is telling us a Gezerah Shava. The concept of 10, which is community, is learnt out from the spies related to the story of Korach, and ultimately comes back to the community who is davening at this point in time that God is saying, and I shall be sanctified amongst the children of Israel, which means there must be 10 people for the sanctification to take effect. Kedushah can only happen when there are 10 people. Let's continue. Alma, mihas, mifsak, no pasek. And everybody agrees, in any case, that one will not interrupt his prayer in order to respond to Kedushah. If one is already involved in his prayer and he didn't get to the right place to respond to the Kedushah, nevertheless, he does not respond to the Kedushah. Let us just take a look at some of these notes. And any expression of sanctity may not be recited in a quorum of fewer than 10 men. All matters of sanctity, Baruch Hu, Kaddish, and Kedushah, are only recited in the presence of 10 men who have reached majority over the age of 13. The notes, among, toch, this verbal analogy appears in greater detail in parallel sources. While here, the essence of the proof is cited, nevertheless, the question is, what is the meaning of among? How many people must be present in order for one of them to be characterized as being among them? It is derived indirectly from the verses until the conclusion is reached that even 10 people are enough for that purpose. So a dilemma was raised before the sages in the yeshiva. Mahu lahafsik, a new law. What is the din with regards to making a separation? Since, of course, we're talking about interruptions over here. We speak about interruption over here. What is the din with regards to making an interruption? So not a separation. Li yahei shmo hagadol mevurach. The Gemara is asking, what is the din that we say with regards to making a hefsek where we are davening, and then the Shliach Tzibur says the Kaddish, and we have to respond, Amen, Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevorach Leolam Ulomer Olmaya. What is the din with responding to this? May one make an interruption or not. Yehei Shemu Hagadol Mevorach, may his great name be blessed. Ki asa Rav Dimi Omar. Now, when Rav Dimi came from Eretz Israel to Bavel, and he was teaching, and they were discussing matters of Torah with him, so he said the following regarding this question that you have. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Shimon, Talmidei to Rabbi Yochanan, and they were pupils, they're the pupils of Rabbi Yochanan, Omri. They say, Lakol ein mafsikin, for everything, one may not make any interruption. Chutz min yehei shmo hagadol mavorach, with the exception of this particular statement, may his great name be blessed. He says that even if a person is occupied in the deepest secrets of the Torah, the actions, the deeds, the story of the story that applies to the chariots, the divine chariots, where a person goes into a deep state of meditation and he enters into this meditation whereby he's able to perceive certain things, the Maaseh Merkava, he's learning the deepest secrets of Torah, he's penetrating into the deepest spiritual worlds that there are, forsake. He says, even if a person is occupied in the deepest secrets of Torah, he's meditating, whatever it is, he should make a hefsek, an interruption, in order to answer Yehei Shmei Rabbah, because it's so important to say that statement. But the halacha is not like him. We don't paskin like these opinions here, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, who were really the pupils of Rabbi Yochanan, and they were therefore repeating the teaching of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, now we continue to the next subject. And we say over here, let's just go back to the notes here. The halacha is not in accordance with his opinion. From here it was derived that one who is engaged in prayer does not respond with any other praise or sanctification. This is illustrated by the following parable. A king ordered two people to perform different tasks. Each must engage in performing his own task, and neither should neglect his own task to perform the task of the other. We see over here, since a person is engaged in prayer, he should not make a separation and sanctify God, Yehei Shmei Rabbah, etc., etc. The Gemara says here, what is the ruling? Is one permitted to interrupt? It is prohibited to interrupt the Amidah prayer for any sacred matter. However, if one hears Kaddish, he must remain silent during the recitation of the passage, may his great name be blessed forever and time, as well as during the Baruch Hu and Kedushah prayers, and he must focus his heart on the communal prayer leader as he recites them. So although he's not going to make a hefsek, a interruption, with regards to actually saying the words, he must still keep quiet and he must listen to what the Shaliach Tzibur is saying and how the community are answering. The Gemara continues. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, these are the words of the Mishnah, Mevarech lifneihem ulachareihem. He may make the blessing before and after, referring to, of course, the Keriat Shema. He makes the blessing. And also when it comes to Birkat Hamazon, according to Rabbi Yehuda, we learned that he should make the bracha afterwards. The Meimra, is that to say, says the Gemara, does that mean the Kasava Rabbi Yehuda Bal Keri Mutar B'divrei Torah? We were speaking about the concept of the Bal Keri, a male who had a seminal emission and therefore is in a state of impurity, may not involve himself in certain holy matters. So the thing is now, the Gemara is challenging against Rabbi Yehuda and saying the fact that Rabbi Yehuda said that he may make the blessings before and afterwards, is that to say that Rabbi Yehuda holds that a Bal Keri, this man who had this emission, Mutar B'divrei Torah, he is in fact permitted in the words of Torah, he may study Torah, but we've been learning throughout this that he's forbidden to study Divrei Torah, because the whole concept is that this particular enactment of Ezra, the Sefer, he came along and he said to us, once a man he's a Bal Keri, then he may not engage in words of Torah until he goes to the mikvah and he purifies himself. However, according to the teaching of the Mishnah, what Rabbi Yehuda says, it seems to be that this man is really allowed to continue studying Torah. V'ho amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, and didn't Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi say, Minayin, where do we know it from? lebal keri, of a man who had this emission, she'asur b'divrei Torah. In fact, it is forbidden for him to engage in the study of Torah. Shneimar, because the verse says, I'll prove it to you. V'odatam levanecha v'livnei vanecha. What one verse teaches us, and you shall instruct them to your children and to your children's children. You shall teach your children Torah. V'samichlei, and right next to it, if you look at the order of the verses, you see that the first verse that we're reading about occurs in Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 9, and the second verse that we're about to quote comes from Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 10. They're right next to each other. Meaning what? If the two verses are next to each other, it must be that they're coming to teach us something that we can learn because they're next to each other. V'samichlei, and right next to it, it says, Yom Asher Omadata, on the day that you stood, meaning that you were going to receive the Torah. Ma lahalan bal kra'in asurin, just as it was, just later on, there in that case, the second case over here, when the Jewish people were receiving the Torah from Har Sinai, at Har Sinai, we know that it was forbidden for a man to be a Balkari and receive the Torah. He had to make sure that he was pure before. Everybody had to make sure that they were pure before they received the Torah. For 3 days already, the Shloshet Yemei HaKabbalah, all the Jewish people had to refrain from being in contact with each other, the opposite sex, or the men and the women had to be separated from each other, in order that there wouldn't be a problem of a man finding himself to be a Balkari, and also a woman also finding herself to be in that same position through the release of the semen from her body. Of course, if she would release the semen and it would be too close to the 3-day period, she herself would become impure as well. So we see over here that a Balkari was not permitted to be present at the time of receiving the Torah. And so since these two expressions occur next to each other, we can learn out something from them. What are we learning out from it? Where it says over here, Afkan, so too over here in our case, Baalei Kra'in Asurin, when it comes to a Balkari, somebody who had this emission, he is also forbidden because the words of Torah relate to what we received at Har Sinai. And that is exactly what we're going to be reciting now. Well, since at that time when they received the Torah, a Balkari was not permitted to receive the Torah, he had to be in a state of purity, so too we should say that it wouldn't be fair to say, according to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, that Rabbi Yehuda would be saying that, in fact, even though he's a Balkari, he could be involved in the study of Torah. Yet, according to what he said, Mevarek lifnei ulacharayim. It seems to be that he can involve himself in the study of Torah. He's making brachot. Certainly when he does Birkat HaMazon, he's going to be reciting the words of Torah which come about in the Birkat HaMazon, at the very least. Let us take a look at our notes and see what we have left out here. From wherein the Torah is derived that one who experiences a seminal emission is prohibited from engaging in matters of Torah, the question was posed. The immersion of one who experienced a seminal emission is a rabbinic ordinance instituted by Ezra, as we just discussed. Why is the Gemara challenging Rabbi Yehuda's opinion from Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi's statement as if it was by Torah law? The answer is, since, based on Ezra's ordinance, the question is legitimate, the Gemara was not insistent on phrasing it with precision and posed the question utilizing the allusion of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Furthermore, the Gemara below explains the entire matter differently. He derives them. Okay, we continue. V'chi tema, and if you say that Rabbi Yehuda lo darish smuchim, maybe you'll come along with a statement, and you'll say, you know what? Rabbi Yehuda did not rely upon this as a proof, and the reason that he never relied upon it as a proof is because of the idea of smuchim. Smuchim means that the two verses are next to each other. Well, according to this teaching, Rabbi Yehuda lo daresh smuchim. It seems to be that Rabbi Yehuda does not explain verses which are joined next to each other. So it would be, therefore, that since these verses are together next to each other, but Rabbi Yehuda would never rely upon it because he doesn't rely upon verses that are joined next to each other to prove anything. V'ho amar Rav Yosef. In other words, if you would say that Rabbi Yehuda would not expound on these verses which come next to each other, but nevertheless, Rav Yosef, Rav Yosef said, didn't he say, Afilu man de lo darish smuchim b'chol haTorah, even a person who does not explain, who does not learn out when the verses are joined to each other from the Torah in general, the Mishnah Torah Daresh, when it comes to learning from the book of Devarim, which is also called Mishnah Torah, the repetition of the Torah. Why is the book of Devarim, of Deuteronomy, known as the Mishnah Torah, the repetition of the Torah? Because really, while the first 4 books of the Torah explain the Torah from the perspective of God, so to speak, the fifth book of the Torah is written in Moshe's own words. Moshe is now teaching over the Torah to Bnei Yisrael on his own. And so therefore it seems to be, according to the teaching at least of Rabbi Yosef, that even those people that don't learn out smuchim in the whole of Torah, but when it comes to the Mishnah Torah, the last book, even it should be that Rabbi Yehuda would also hold by that. Rabbi Yehuda lo darish smuchin b'chol haTorah kula. Now, Rabbi Yehuda, he does not learn out the smuchim, the joint verses throughout the entire Torah entirely, or the Mishnah Torah daresh. But it comes out that he does learn out from the Mishnah Torah. And this over here, these verses that we learnt about, indeed, they come from the book of Devarim. And therefore, there's no reason why Rav Yehuda shouldn't learn out that the Baal Keri is forbidden to study Torah, and therefore it makes no sense as to why it was that in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda said that you make blessings before and afterwards, as if to say that a Baal Keri is indeed mutar, it's permitted for him to engage in the study of Torah. The note, he derives them in Deuteronomy. The reason is, although the sanctity of Deuteronomy is equal to the sanctity of the other books of the Torah, it consists of Moses recapitulating that which was previously stated. Certainly, it was not repeated in vain. Moses' juxtapositions and combinations are significant, and halakha may be derived from them. That's what it is. A juxtaposition is the smuchim, when the 2 verses are joined right next to each other. We continue. Ubechol haTorah kula manalan delo daresh. Now the Gemara continues in this question-answer format and says, that's interesting what you say. So you're saying like this, that in the whole of Torah, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold basmuchim, with the exception, of course, of the Mishnah Torah. Minalan de lo daresh. How do we know that he doesn't expound from all the other parts of the Torah? Answers the Gemara, I'll tell you, I'll prove it to you. The Tanya, because we learned in a brisa, it was taught in a brisa, Ben Azai Omer. Shimon ben Azai, that great sage, as you know, he was one of the 4 rabbis who entered into the deeper secrets of the Torah, into the Pardes. Ben Azai says, Ne'emar, the verse says, Mechashefa lo techayeh. A sorceress you shall not let live. Now this comes from the book of Shmot, of Exodus 22:17, and now we're about to quote another verse which comes directly after that, Exodus 22:18. And since these 2 verses are next to each other, we call them smuchim, and therefore we're going to use it as a proof that Rabbi Yehuda indeed does not hold by smuchim in the rest of the Torah. Ne'emar, it says, Mechashefa lo techayeh, a sorceress you shall not let live. Shen v'ne'emar, and it says immediately afterwards, Kol shochev in behema mos yumas. Anybody who lies together with an animal shall surely be put to death. A person who has a sexual relationship with an animal, he will be put to death. Now these 2 verses come right next to each other. The one follows the other. First, we learn about the sorceress who should not be allowed to live. And second, we come to the situation of the one who engages in a forbidden sexual relationship, and he should be put to death. Samchu inyan loy. So they put these matters together to say, lomar, to say, ma shochev in behema biskila, just as it is that a person who lies together with an animal who will surely be put to death is put to death through skila, stoning. Af mechashefa nami biskila. So too this mechashefa, the sorceress, she may not let her live. How do you kill her? Through skila. How do you know that she should die? Through stoning. Because the 2 verses are right next to each other. Since the person who lies with the animal shall be put to death through stoning, so too the mechashefa, the sorceress, who is engaged in a forbidden activity, when the Torah says don't let her live, it means to imply you need to put her to death. How do you put it to death? Through stoning. Omar le Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said about this whole story, and is it? Because the Torah put these two verses together, are you telling me that we can learn out that this one should go to be stoned? The two verses come next to each other. The second verse refers to stoning. The first verse just simply indicates that you shouldn't dare to live. It makes no mention whatsoever of how you should put it to death. So Rabbi Yehuda says, very strange of you. Just because the two verses are together, that implies that the mechashefa should also be put to death through skila. Ella, but rather, of v'yidoni bichlal kol hamechashvim. It comes out that the ov and the yidoni, which are two types of sorcery, witchcraft, etc., mediums and wizards, they were bichlal kol hamechashvim. They're included amongst all of these sorcerous people. Hayu, they were amongst them all. V'lama yatsu. So therefore, why are these particular ones taken out? Etc. Lakish lahim. This is coming to make a comparison to them. And it's coming to teach. Coming to teach you, just as it is that the medium and the wizards are put to death through skila. So too, the mechashefa, the sorceress, is put to death through skila. As you see over here on the notes on the side here, mediums and wizards were included among all sorcerers. And why were they singled out from the rest? Meaning, in the verse, it says over here, and a man or woman who is a medium or wizard shall surely be put to death. They shall stone them with stones, their blood is upon them. Why were they taken out of this category? In order to make a comparison, just as the medium and the wizard are executed by stoning, so too the sorceress, she is also executed by stoning. But we learn it out from this verse over here, and not from the smuchim in the previous analogy that we spoke about. Fine, up until here, so far makes sense. Let us learn about Ben Azai. Ben Azai is Shimon Ben Azai. We know that one of the reasons that he is not even called by the name Shimon Ben Azai, he's called simply by the name Ben Azai, is because he's called by his father's name because he was very young. He was a great Talmid Chacham, and even in his youth, when he was a very young man, 18, 19, 20, however old he was at the time, since he hadn't yet established himself in the fullest sense as one of the leading Torah scholars in terms of his maturity, so he was only referred to by his name towards his father, Ben Azai. But we know that his real name is Shimon Ben Azai, like Ben Zoma. Ben Zoima and Shimon Ben Zoima is, of course, the same person. Shimon Ben Zoima was also a young man and a great Torah giant, but because he was so young, he also was referred to by the name of his father. Now, Shimon Ben Azai was one of the Tanaim in Yavne. Shimon Ben Azai was never ordained, which is why he's called by his name alone, without a title. He is usually referred to simply as Ben Azai. He was considered one of the outstanding sages, and his wisdom was celebrated for many generations. Apparently, he did not study Torah in his youth until he met Rabbi Akiva's daughter. She promised to marry him if he studied Torah. Consequently, he went to study with Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Ishmael, and was the primary student and even a disciple colleague of Rabbi Akiva, whom he considered to be the preeminent sage of his generation in Israel. It is unclear whether he never married, or whether he married Rabbi Akiva's daughter and left her for a short time later due to his overwhelming desire to study Torah. One of the difficulties encountered here with the story of Ben Azai is that he loved studying Torah so much that he couldn't pull himself away from it for anything in the world, as far as he was concerned. To be in a situation of being married and have a family life and spend all that time that he could have been studying Torah towards his family, to him it wasn't on. He was so addicted to his study of Torah, he couldn't pull himself away from it. He completely devoted himself to the study of Torah, as can be seen in the Mishnah in Sota, which says, since Ben Azai died, there are no more diligent people. His statements can be found in the Mishnah, in Brachot, and in the Gemara, dealing with both Halacha and Agadah. Apparently, he had several disciples in Tiberias, his city of residence. Ben Azai engaged in the study of esoterica and is one of the four who entered the mystical orchard. The Breiter in Tractate Chagiga says that he peaked and died. The verse, precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints, was quoted in reference to his death. So basically, Ben Azai was a very great man, and we know what the story was. Basically, when he entered into the orchard, when he entered into the paradise, into the deeper secrets of Torah, he experienced this divine vision in front of him that was so overwhelming that he couldn't bring himself to coming back into this world again, and he simply died. And he left this world in a state of bliss, in meditation, deep meditation. He just let his soul leave his body and cleave to the divine presence. And so the Torah says about him, precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints. Why was it so precious? Of course, it wasn't a precious thing so much that somebody should die. I mean, tzaddikim die. What's so precious about that? The expressions of preciousness refers to the fact that there's a sadness involved. It is not just an aspect of preciousness, and it is, oh, so special that here was this man who studied Torah, and then he left his body and he died. That's not what God wants from us. There is something lacking to the individual that unfortunately he never got married, and he never had children, and he never experienced the family life. So God is commiserating. He's sharing his sadness with everybody by saying it is precious. It's something that was so special to him because here was a man who lost out on ordinary life activities as all men should involve themselves in, and he gave it up for the sake of Hashem, not what God wants. So God says it's precious. It's not necessarily what I want. It's the death of his saints. He gave up his very life rather than to go back to the world and to inhabit the world as it's what God wants. In one sense, it sounds like something positive. In another sense, it sounds like something quite negative. We must see it from all sides and understand the concept deeper. The Gemara says here, the background, why were they singled out? Lama Yatsu. This is an instance of one of the 13 hermeneutic principles through which the Torah is interpreted. When a particular case already included in the general category is expressly mentioned to teach something new, that special provision applies to all other cases included in the general category. Here, included in the general category are all of the various kinds of sorcerers. Explicitly specified are the mediums and wizards who are mentioned in their own verse. The verse that teaches that they are punished by stoning was expressly mentioned not only to teach about their punishment, but rather to illuminate the general category, i.e., the punishment of all, the punishment for all sorcerers. Now, what is the legal status of a sorceress? Din mechashefa. A sorcerer who performed actual sorcery is executed by stoning. One who merely creates the impression of sorcery is punished with lashes of rebellion. That means rabbinical lashes for rebelling against the sages. So we see over here that that is indeed the halacha. If a person is caught out as being a legitimate sorcerer, they are put to death by stoning. It is something that we should not engage in. And if they are just creating the impression of sorcery, they are given lashes of rebellion. Those people who are interested might wish to learn more about the subject, which is dealt with quite extensively in terms of halakha, of the concept of modern magic today, as to whether or not a person can involve himself in magic today. For example, a sleight of hands, or doing things where people think that one is a magician of sorts, that one can really make things change and make things appear out of nowhere and all sorts of things like that. Is this permitted by the Torah? Because isn't this, after all, just a part of this concept of sorcery? And if it's real sorcery, if it's really that the person is able to achieve it and they turned let's say, for example, they turned a piece of silk into a bunny. They threw the silk up into the air, turned into a bunny, or they turned into a dove, or they put the silk into their hand, and when they opened up their hand, it disappeared. Well, if they really did that, they would be liable for sorcery. This is activities a person should not engage in. And what is the purpose, basically, of that? What are you trying to prove to people? Second of all, if it is not real magic, as a sorcerer might do, but it is magic to fool people and deceive people, that is also something that is dangerous, because especially there are many people that watch this and they think that these people who perform these particular activities are really magicians, when really they're not magicians. All that they're doing is they're hiding things. For example, they might have a fake thumb, and when they push the silk into their hands, they actually push the silk into the thumb, which is in their hand at that point in time, and then they quickly put the other thumb, the thumb of the one hand, into the artificial thumb, and when they hold their hands up, it looks as if the silk has disappeared. But everybody who knows the trick knows that he's not a magician. All he is a person who has some money, and he went off to buy a trick at the magic shop. And now he's demonstrating that he's able to perform the trick without us seeing what it is that he does. But of course, once we know how the trick is done, we realize all he is a good actor. But if a person is involved, of course, in these activities to a degree now that people can spot him out and they can see, hold on a second, what's going on over here? I'm not quite sure what you're doing, etc. So then at that point in time, he falls into this category that he'd be liable for a punishment of lashes of rebellion, because sorcery and magic and all this is something that is not really permitted by Torah law. And it is quite a problem situation. Many people like to become magicians for children's parties and things like that. And it's all very well and good, and it sounds like an appropriate thing to do. But in a certain sense, we have to be careful, because the children are watching, and they might even think that we really are magicians who are able to do these things. We're amazing people that we can perform this magic. But that is a subject to itself and needs to be dealt with competently by an appropriate person, and should be asked if a person has that particular question. Over Mishnah Torah. Now, when we go to the fifth book of the Torah, known as the Mishnah Torah, this is our discussion that we're speaking about the Smuchim as it relates towards the 4 books of the Torah, as it relates towards the 5th book of the Torah. Minalan de Darish. How do we know that Rabbi Yehuda did in fact expound on the Smuchim that appeared within the Mishnah Torah? The Tanya, as it was taught in a Braita, Rabbi Eliezer Oimer, Rabbi Eliezer says, here is the story. Neise Adam Anusis Aviv Umefutas Aviv. A person may marry the woman who was raped by one's father or was seduced by one's father. Now we know, halachically speaking, for example, a man may not marry his mother, for example, because the mother, of course, for a number of reasons, is forbidden, and he may not be intimate, of course, with the woman that his father marries. He may not be intimate with her either, because this is a part of his father's relationship. Now we take it one step further. Noise Adam Anusis Aviv, the Torah says that in spite of all those other prohibitions, a man is permitted to marry his father's, the woman who was raped by his father, or the woman who was seduced by his father. Anusis Beno, the woman who was raped by his son, Umefutas Beno, and the woman who was seduced by his son. Though one is prohibited by Torah law from marrying the wife of his father or the wife of his son, this prohibition does not apply to a woman raped or seduced by them. Okay, that's point number 1. We continue. Rabbi Yehuda Oimer, Rabbi Yehuda Oiser, Ba'anusis Aviv, Umefutas Aviv. Rabbi Yehuda prohibits this relationship that we spoke about above here with Rabbi Eliezer, who says that he may marry. Rabbi Yehuda says it is forbidden for a person to marry the woman who was raped by his father, and it is forbidden for a man, in other words, the son, to be together with the woman who was seduced by his father. Rabbi Yehuda contradicting the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. V'omar Rav Gidal, Omar Rav, and Rav Gidal said that Rav said, my time at the Rabbi Yehuda, what is the reason that Rabbi Yehuda said that it's forbidden for him to marry this woman? Because the verse says, now, if we pay attention to all of this going on, we can see how it fits together. The verse says as following, Lo yikach ish es eshes aviv. A person may not take the wife of his father. Velo yigale es knaf aviv. And he may not reveal the skirts of his father, which means the woman who the father was intimate with, he may not himself be intimate with her. Kanaf shira'a aviv, the skirts that a skirt that his father had seen. That's just a nice way of saying, a euphemism, a nice way of saying really the woman who was seduced by his father, the kanaf. Shira'a aviv lo yigale, he may not reveal it, meaning to say he may not marry her. Umimai, and from where do we know it from? The ba'anusas aviv kesiv. Where do we know it from that the verse is written with regards to the anusas aviv kesiv? With regard, we know it's written that it's the woman who was raped by the father. The smich lay, how do we know it was the father that raped this woman? The smich lay, because the next verse says, V'nasana isha shochev ima, and the man shall give, and the man who lay with her must give her father 50 shekels because he has violated her. So since we see these two verses next to each other, the idea of the father having to receive payment and also the idea of the kanaf, we see in Deuteronomy 23:1 and Deuteronomy 22:29 next to each other again. So since these two verses occur next to each other, that's how we learn that it refers to the father who is seducing, is raping this particular woman. Omri, they say, in other words, at any rate, we see in Deuteronomy, Rabbi Yehuda derives homiletic interpretation from juxtaposed verses. Why does he fail to derive that one who experiences a seminal emission is prohibited from engaging in matters of Torah from the juxtaposition of the verses? Which means before already we gave those two verses next to each other, which were in fact from the book of Mishnah Torah, from the book of Devarim. Omri, they replied, they said, yes, it's true, the Mishnah Torah Daresh. Rabbi Yehuda does indeed expound on the smuchim that appear in the Mishnah Torah. V'hanei smuchim, and these close verses, mibayale, he requires le'idach, for another teaching, to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, of what Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is. And that is the reason that he couldn't expound on him with regards to the idea of a Balkari not being permitted, or not being permitted to study Torah, because he couldn't use it for that purpose, because he was using the two verses to explain something else. To Omar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, livno Torah, anybody who teaches his son Torah, a person who teaches his son Torah, it's as if he received the Torah from Har Chorev, from Mount Sinai. When one teaches one's son Torah, it is considered as if he received the Torah from Har Sinai. How do we know that? Shneimar, because the verse says, V'odatam levanecha v'livnei vanecha, and you shall make them known to your sons, your children, and to your children's children. Ukesif basrei, and it's written afterwards, Yom asher omadeta lifnei Hashem elokecha b'chorev, on that day that you stood in front of Hashem, your God, at Chorev. Since these two verses appear next to each other, it's coming to teach us that teaching one's child, one's son, Torah, it's as if you received the Torah from Har Sinai. Therefore, Rabbi Yehuda cannot derive from that same juxtaposition a prohibition banning one who experienced a seminal emission from engaging in matters of Torah. He wasn't allowed to use this as a rule to say why it should be that somebody who is a Balkari cannot study Torah. Let us take a look at some of these notes, what we miss out on over here. The halacha, the legal status of a sorceress. We said a man may wed a woman raped by his father and once seduced by his father. A woman raped by his son and once seduced by his son. This is because the Torah only prohibited a woman married to his father or his son and not a woman with whom they had promiscuous relations, as per the opinion of the rabbis in their dispute with the individual opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara continues. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, Zav, that means a person who has a seminal emission, which is not of the category of the general emission. He's called a Zav, and he sees a seminal emission. V'nida, a woman who is in a state of nida, that means to say that she is menstruating, shepalta shikvas zera, and some of the seeds that had gone into her comes out of her body. Hamish amishet, so one who is now engaged in intercourse, v'ras adam, and she saw blood, tzrika tevila. Seems to be that all of these people require immersion. For Rabbi Yehuda poter, Rabbi Yehuda exempts him. Remember, our conversation was the idea of a Balkari, and the Balkari is somebody who had a seminal emission. He must first go to the mikveh before it is permitted for him to study Torah. Now, we learned in a Mishnah that a Zav who saw Keri, or a Nida woman who had a flow of the seed coming out of her, and also somebody who engaged in sexual intercourse, and then afterwards she saw blood, a woman then saw blood, all of these people must go to mikvah. It says over here, in order to purify themselves from the impurity of the seminal emission before they may engage in matters of Torah. For Rabbi Yehuda Poter, Rabbi Yehuda exempts them from immersion. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it seems to be that these people are not required to go to the mikvah, and therefore it seems that they could perhaps continue studying Torah. Ad kan, up until here, however, Rabbi Yehuda only exempted from immersion in the case of the Zav. Lo ad kan lo patar Rabbi Yehuda. Up until now, Rabbi Yehuda did not exempt. Ela bezav shera akeri, except for the Zav who saw a seminal emission. D'me'ikara lav ba'tevilahu, because from the beginning he never had to go to the mikveh in any case. Why? Because he has to wait until counting the 7 days. He remains impure with the 7-day impurity of the Zav, and therefore it's no good if he goes to the mikveh in any case, because he's still got to wait 7 days of purity, in which there is no longer any semen. Aval balkeri gereida mechayev. However, Rabbi Yehuda did obligate somebody who's in the normal category of having an emission of semen, and he, of course, must go to the mikvah. So we see over here with the case of one who experiences seminal emission alone with no concurrent impurity, even Rabbi Yehuda requires immersion before he engages in Torah matters. So it's not that simple. Rabbi Yehuda did not exempt the person who had the seminal emission. He obligates him. Once he has the emission, he must go to the mikvah, and only afterwards may he study Torah. The key tema, and if you'll say, Hu hadin, the same thing applies. Ta'afilu balkeri gereda nami patar Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe you think that even the balkeri by himself, also Rabbi Yehuda exempted him. Vahai, and that's the kami palgi bezav shira akeri. That they're arguing about with regards to the zav, this person who had this other type of seminal emission, and he saw. Kolchan Drabanan. It's coming to teach us the power of the rabbis, which means what? It says over here, I'll just read it inside so that we can follow it clearly. And if you say the same is true, even in the case of one who experienced a seminal emission alone, that Rabbi Yehuda also exempts him from immersion. And the fact that they disagree in the case of a Zav who experienced a seminal emission and not in the case of a person who experienced a seminal emission alone is in order to convey the far-reaching nature of the opinion of the rabbis who require immersion. Even in this case, the rabbi said that a Zav must go to the mikvah, even though he would still have to wait 7 days. Ema Seifa, say the end. Meaning what? Say the last case of that same Mishnah. A woman who was engaged in intercourse and she saw blood, she requires immersion. Now the Gemara continues to clarify, Leman katane la, in accordance with whose opinion is this thought? Ilay melarabanan, if you say it's according to the rabbis, pshita, well that's obvious, that's what we're saying. Hashta, now, umay zav shira'a keri, demi ikara, lav bar tevila, who, just as it is, that a zav who saw a keri, from the beginning, he never had to go to the mikvah. But the rabbis obligated him and said, you're going to go to the mikvah in any case. A woman who had intercourse and she saw blood, she already is required to go to the mikvah, because already there was, she came into contact with the semen, and therefore she already had to go to the mikvah. Isn't that all the more so? Of course it would apply to her. Ela lav Rabbi Yehuda, but no, isn't this really the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda? The dafka katanila, and this case was taught specifically in order to teach the following as you move on to daf kaf beis amud aleph, mishameshis v'ra'asa nida, a woman who engaged in intercourse and she saw nida, eina tzricha and she saw the blood, Eina tzricha tevila, she does not require to go to immerse. Aval balkeri greida mechayev, but somebody who is a balkeri alone, he is obligated, he must go to the mikvah. Lo teima mevarech, answers the Gemara at the end of the discussion. It must be that when Rabbi Yehuda was speaking about the idea of the person being required to make the brachot before and afterwards, he was not referring to making the brachos because he himself believes that the person must go to the mikveh first, ella meharher, but rather he said he should think. He wasn't saying that one should actually say the brachot, but his expression of reciting had nothing to do with making the blessing, mevarech, but rather meharher, he should think in his mind about what the blessings are. Let us just read this last note over here on the side. In order to convey the far-reaching nature of the opinion of the rabbis, since the statement of the sages are deemed to be as concise and precise as possible, the expectation is that a dispute will be framed in a manner that will facilitate a more profound understanding of the different opinions. Therefore, one may not ascribe a broader scope to a given opinion beyond that which was expressed. At times, however, this agreement is framed in a manner that does not, in fact, elucidate the entire scope of possibilities in the position of one of the parties. To the dispute. That is the case where it is framed in a manner that demonstrates the far-reaching nature of the position of the other party to the dispute. In our case, that is the opinion of the rabbis who are stringent, and in fact, Rabbi Yehuda was in fact lenient. Now, the Gemara is going to continue and speak about the same idea. We're following on the discussion in our next lesson that even though the Gemara is telling us that Rabbi Yehuda was telling us that one has to think the brachot and not to recite them, we're going to learn now another section dealing with, does Rabbi Yehuda really hold by thinking, or does he really hold, on the contrary, about speaking? So we've reached the end of our lesson today. Thank you very much for joining me. I'm Eliyahu Sher from Chesed to Emet, my website www.lovingkindness.co. If you've enjoyed the shiur, got something out of it, please do like the shiur by clicking on the thumbs up button below. Subscribe to my channel, click on the bell button to be notified of future shiurim. Please share the shiur with friends and family who you feel might get something out of it as well. We're trying to promote ourselves and continue to teach even more Torah. We need your support in every way possible. When you subscribe to our channel, when you share this with friends and you watch it on the channel, you really are supporting us and you're helping us to reach out to further people. If you'd like to support us in a more practical manner beyond that, please feel free to visit the website and become a member on our website by offering a small donation, whatever you're able to help us through the month, and that will help us to be able to produce more of these videos, teach more Torah, and be able to give ourselves more to people who want to learn. Thank you very much, and if you wish to be in touch with me, of course, my website, my email is always open. Feel free to send me an email on any subject on your mind, Torah, life, growth, and I'd be delighted to be in touch with you. These are things that I enjoy speaking about and importance, and let's focus on it and grow together and deal with our mistakes together, and whatever it is that we're doing, let us progress together and become partners in all of our activities. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to another shiur in the near future, and I wish you everything of the best. Take care. Shalom, shalom. Bye-bye.